Hello, I'm Trevor Campbell and I'm Head of Department for Professional Knowledge, and that's also called Core Knowledge. In addition to that, I'll be one of your lecturers for the first and the third year in Anatomy and Pathophysiology. And if you've not had enough of me by then, I'll also be one of your clinic supervisors in the third and the fourth year at clinic. And then finally, I'll be one of your final examiners. I'm a final examiner and I'll be one of your examiners at the end of the year. So we'll be seeing an awful lot of each other over the next 4 years. I thought I'd start by just telling you what professional knowledge or core knowledge is all about, so that as a student, you're really aware of what's going to be going on over the next 3 years. So essentially, core knowledge covers, I guess, what used to be called the biosciences. And so what that means is that covers the anatomy in years 1 and 2, and then pathophysiology. So that's how the body works and what goes wrong with it. And that's covered in years 1, 2, and 3. And then in year 2, so all that's done in those years. And then in year 2, in addition to the anatomy and the pathophysiology, you will also have clinical methods. And what that will cover is how to do an examination, a medical examination of somebody, how to diagnose and do a differential diagnosis, and how to do all of the basic medical tests and understand the basic medical tests that a doctor would do. So things like understanding X-rays, how to test the nervous system, how to test the abdominal system and the cardiovascular system, and all of that, plus the associated diseases of those systems, are what's covered in the core knowledge module. So it's quite a big module. As far as year 1 is concerned, the core knowledge module, the anatomy and the physiology, makes up the basis of everything you do in the other modules, so that you will be taking the stuff that you learn in anatomy and that you will then be applying it in the other departments, with the other departments learning about osteopathic techniques and examination skills, and then integrating that together. So really it's the fundamental information. So we've talked about how the anatomy, the pathophysiology and the clinical methods run as individual subjects, but we don't actually teach them like that within the European School of Osteopathy, because if you learn those subjects as individual subjects, sometimes, especially first-year students, can find it difficult to understand what does this mean and how do those things pull together within a real patient. So the way we teach those individual subjects of anatomy and pathophysiology is that we do our best to integrate them so that a thread runs between all of the individual topics. Kind of hard to understand, but if I, for example, would talk to you about cells and tissues, which is one of the things that we talk about in the first year, so we would cover the structure of tissues within anatomy. We would talk about the individual tissues, epithelial tissue, muscle tissue, connective tissue, and how that's layered within the body. But then, in the same week, within the pathophysiology module, we would take the contents of those tissues, what makes the tissues up, the cells, and talk about how cells work, how they secrete things and how they would form the tissues. So you have an idea of not only what the body is built like, but also how that individual component of the body works. And then, surprisingly, we'd even take that further and talk about what happens when cells and tissues go wrong. So as a follow-up to those two modules, within the pathophysiology section, we would talk about cancer and what happens when cells mutate and form different types of cancer. And within that, you would learn how to apply it. how to grade cancers, how to judge cancers, the common treatment for cancers. And then we would do even a biopsychosocial part of that, which talks about what cancers mean to people. And the particular module, the reason why I'm picking on this is that I've just done this module, that particular module would talk about the psychological and emotional impact on a patient with cancer, using videos and using personal experience from individuals. So we would take the whole thing through from anatomy to physiology to pathology, right the way into what it means for individuals. And that theme is followed through for all of the individual courses. How would we actually physically teach that? Because it's quite difficult to do. And how do we deal with individuals' learning needs throughout that course? One of the things we appreciate is that it's very difficult for people to learn in one individual style. Some people like reading books, some people like watching videos, some people like listening to stories, and some people, especially osteopaths, often like actively doing things. And so the way we teach all of the modules under core knowledge is that we use a whole mixture of those individual forms of presentations. Some of the lectures that are straightforward lectures, like this, if you like, are recorded. And they would be recorded by the lecturers using a camera, and would be recorded without an audience present, using slides. And the beauty of those recordings, we would then put them onto our learning platform, which is called the Learning Zone, and those recordings would be there for people to watch, listen to, hear in their own time, over and over and over again. So that's one format. Second type of format was we have recorded live lectures. So what that means is that all the students can either sit in their bedrooms or wherever they want to be and still participate in the lectures. So they would have their computers in front of them. The presenter would be giving the lecture. But the advantage of this is that during that lecture, the students can type in questions or even come on board live so that they can talk to the individual lecture. And therefore, we can answer questions and engage with the students during recorded live lectures. And I've said they're recorded live lectures because also those lectures would also be put on the platform so that the students, again, if they can't participate in them, can watch those lectures in their own time. A third way that we run the course is using tutorials, and we take two types of formats for tutorials. Some of them are done in small groups, again, in online platforms. And so people will have 10 or 15 people within a tutorial group, and then they would all be seen on that tutorial. We'd use Teams, and so that the students can engage in a much more personal, interactive way with the lecturer. And in some of the tutorials, in fact, in many of the tutorials, they're not run by a lecturer, although the lecturer would be present. They'd be run by the students themselves with a tutor or a lecturer facilitating. And finally, yes, we do have the students in the classrooms. At least once a week with anatomy and physiology, we do live tutorials. Live as in they're in a classroom and so are all the students. And what we do there is a lot of practical exercises. So to give you an example, in anatomy, we would be drawing on each other, labelling where all the muscles are and learning about their origins and actions and where the places are. We would be palpating each other's bodies and learning where the parts of the spine are on a real live person. We would be playing games. We've just recently played a game, believe it or not, on cell division. And I won't tell you how we did that, but, we'd be getting people in groups and acting it out in sort of interactive formats. And we've got some ideal grounds here at the ESO for doing that. So some of those will be done in the classroom. Some of those might even be done outside, and some of those might even be done in the local woods. Sounds kind of exciting, and we'd sit around and play games and tell stories about the things that we've learnt within the classroom. So there's all sorts of different ways of teaching those individual subjects. And in addition to that, we would be doing mock exams and practice tests as well. And the objective of that is that we cater for everybody. And if individual students are a little bit shy, they don't want to engage in those practical things, or they feel, oh, that's a little bit too much for me, that's absolutely fine. We let students learn in their own ways. And of course, we also encourage individual, more academic learning styles regarding textbooks, etc. One of the ways that we teach anatomy is, in addition to all those ways that I've talked about, we would also do live anatomical, what's called prosection. And what that means is that we take our students to Guy's Hospital, into their dissection labs and into their pathology labs, and that you work on real bodies, learning the anatomy on, I was going to say actually live bodies, but of course they're not. They're specimens, but they are cadavers, and you would learn to see and feel and understand how anatomy works in the actual human body. And students find that so useful, because it's one thing drawing each other, but it's an entirely different thing looking at the actual anatomy in an actual real body. Again, sometimes that's quite difficult for students to deal with. And again, if students don't want to do that or want to pause and wait, they can do that as time goes by. All of that is done, well, all of that's year 3, and that's year 1 rather, and that's a lot of work, but that's then continued in the same format in year 2. And then in year 3, the anatomy finishes, but the pathophysiology keeps on, and we use our year 3 to apply all of that learning within tutorial groups and in classrooms to real patients, because by then you will have been in the clinic, you will have been with me as a clinic tutor, and other people as well, of course, and what you will then be able to do is to apply all that learning within real clinical scenarios. And so in pathophysiology year 3, we will be talking about those clinical scenarios and what that means. So that, in a relatively big nutshell, is core knowledge. And what it means is that the students that qualify as osteopaths from the European School of Osteopathy are not only very well educated in the medical sciences so that they can interact as qualified osteopaths with all of the other medical professionals, be they consultants, radiologists, hospital physiologists, GPs, and also with, of course, their patients. They've not only got those really excellent communication skills, but also they have really superb levels of knowledge and understanding, and the ability to apply that knowledge within a large number of clinical settings. And that means that the osteopathic training is really quite a unique form of training, whereby it's not like any other degree where you learn the knowledge and then go and do a job. With a degree in osteopathy, you have, in addition to the academic knowledge, an unbelievably effective set of intercommunication and interpersonal skills that you can apply not only in an osteopathic setting, but also in many other forms of industry. And one of the key things that employers are looking for today isn't just a degree, but it's the ability to use that to communicate and talk to people within a lot of different settings. And those settings could be within the more traditional, if you like, biomedical sciences within hospitals. A lot of our students go on to retrain as medical students, and the osteopathic training is excellent like that. I personally come from a background in the pharmaceutical industry, and I know that many of my colleagues within the pharmaceutical industry, within training and development, had already trained as osteopaths, and their biomedical sciences were very useful within that area, in areas of research, in areas of patient care, and even in government areas like things like counselling, social work, etc., 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 as well as within industry. And so a modern day osteopath has the ability not only to acquire academic knowledge, but also the ability to apply that knowledge in the wider 21st century employment environment. So I look forward to seeing you all next year, or maybe even this year, depending on when the video is going to be released. Thank you very much.